Lime Loop's Behind the Green podcast, where we get behind the buzz of sustainability and talk to people building our greener tomorrow. I'm your host, Chantal Emmanuel, CTO and co-founder of Lime Loop, and I am joined today by the incomparable Gordon Seabury, CEO of Toad&Co. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
I know you've told this origin story 1,001 times, and I'll say one more time, if you can please tell me a little bit about yourself, a little bit before Toad&Co, and how you came to join as CEO.
Sure. So, been CEO for 25 years now, believe it or not. We just celebrated our 25th anniversary, which is exciting. And I've also, it happens that I've been married 25 years. So my wife has been an incredible saint, supporting me through all this. I have two daughters, and 24 and 22. And I think they're finally proud of their dad because they're really excited about the product and the brand these days. But how we got started, I was, in my background, I was a consultant before Toad&Co for Deloitte & Touche in the US and in Europe. But always was really fixated on becoming an entrepreneur. Ultimately, went back to business school, got an entrepreneurial degree to make sure that in case I wasn't very good at entrepreneurship, I had an insurance policy to get a good job. But what really inspired me in my younger life was this idea of a triple bottom line business, and it was very rare. I always point out three businesses, baby boomer businesses, that were my inspiration: Ben and Jerry's, Stonyfield Farms, and Patagonia, our neighbors in the outdoor industry. And it was uncommon in those days to think about the environment or social responsibility as important to business. It was predominantly financially focused. And so my goal was to, if I was going to be an entrepreneur, build a sustainable, responsible business and be a bigger part of that change. And thankfully, every generation that has come since looks at that vision as more and more important. And it's really great to see the younger businesses these days starting up with cause-based foundations from the start. But so back in, and the reason I ended up in the outdoor business, I actually didn't know very much about apparel, but I knew about business. And I thought the outdoor industry was a great place to potentially start a company, because the ethos for particularly the environment back then was strong. And so you had an audience, both from a peer-to-peer business perspective and a consumer, that was engaged in this idea of triple bottom line impact. And so it seemed to be a good environment and ecosystem to start a company. And I happened across a woman that is now married, Jessica Nordhaus, to a college buddy of mine, who was doing this really cool hat company in Telluride, where she was called Horny Toad at the time, and she was converting fleece, recycled fleece that was predominantly designed for performance wear. And she was making these cool hats and vests and jackets so that you could be on the mountain or out mountain biking or hiking during the day and then look stylish at night. It was, I think, 1990s color block and ribbon trim styling, but it was a really fascinating idea. And so as I got into it and did my research, translated to the fact that all of a sudden fabric technology was getting to a place where you could actually both have it perform and also look good. And prior to that, it had really been pretty engineered, think rubber glue to seal your seams and your outerwear. And so I really love this idea of having one wardrobe to do everything, to look and not have a uniform for every activity. And that's how I got involved. Jessica was selling the business. It was a $40,000 hat company out of her basement in Telluride. And so it was really, we had a real garage band when we started, and she acted as our designer for 2 years as we transitioned. And in 1996, we showed up at Outdoor Retailer and unveiled the business to the world and sold a bunch of hats. And it's been a real amazing ride and adventure ever since.
That's amazing. Kind of sticking to kind of that time period, I would love to hear more about the early days of standing up that supply chain in a sustainable way. Because I know for us at Lime Loop, 3 years ago when we asked for recycled materials, they didn't even bat an eye at us. But I can imagine 25 years ago, you're going to a manufacturer. What were those conversations like to even start this?
Yeah, it was, like I said, I think my instinct to end up in the outdoor space helped us a ton because there was already some groundwork and foundation laid with Patagonia. Actually, a lot of our product people in the early days were expats, as we called them. And so through those hires and those relationships, we were able to develop a best-in-class strategy. And initially, in the early days, we were domestically manufactured, and we were just using recycled fabrics, and we initially organic, conventional cotton. All right, well, I have a really funny, very quick story on organic cotton. When Patagonia announced they were going 100% organic, I thought that was absolutely the thing to do, and we needed to be right on board and support that idea. Unfortunately, we weren't of the size or of the supply chain sophistication to make that move. And so I remember thinking about a year into that transition that we were going to go out of business because we'd get we were just too small. The scale was just too small to actually get consistent quality. And frankly, the organic cotton supply chain was, it's such an early stage. It was just not fully developed, particularly for a company of our size. So we had to back off that. And it taught me that we really had to have a methodical and thoughtful approach to our sustainability practices, because at the end of the day, it's how long and how big an impact you have. It's one thing to be sustainable, it's another thing to be sustainable in terms of the business side. And so that balance was really an early lesson. And so we leveraged all of the tools that were already established as much as we possibly could, and just piggybacked off of some great early stage innovators in the industry to get our supply chain up and running. And we've been improving it, and it's an ongoing continuous improvement process.
Yeah, and it brings up a good point. I think that sustainable versus sustainable, I think it's a conversation that happens a lot today. It's kind of like, we'll make these changes if, and like insert, if it nets us more profit, if it attracts Gen Z. There's
Right.
always kind of an asterisk next to this desire. And I'm curious kind of what your answer to people who talk about it as if they're contradictions to one another, as opposed to a path that
Yeah,
has to happen.
it's a great question. I think it's so easy to say one thing, and then when the decision has to be made, compromise. And even for us, the good news was from the beginning we were committed, and it was in our DNA. It wasn't about selling more product. Matter of fact, it was more costly, and the consumer really in the early days didn't care. There was a time at which, and then for a really long time, it was sort of a tiebreaker, where if you had a sustainable product of equal quality and interest as a non-sustainable product, we might win that battle. But it's never been necessarily good for business in the traditional sense. Now that's different. Now the consumer, if you don't have a legitimate cause or authentic sustainable story, it's going to hurt you, particularly going forward. So that's one of the things, because we did find that 100% organic cotton. Okay, we have to back off that. You get to the margin conversations and the cost conversations, and you make compromises. And that's really when, about a decade ago, we decided, we've done our best as in the structure that we've set up for ourselves, but we're not putting our feet to the fire and really having 1, 3, and 5 year goals. And so starting about a decade ago, we would do an annual offsite where we would spend a day talking about it, not just the supply chain side of sustainability, but across the organization, what things we were doing to lower our footprint and improve our citizenship, on a global basis. And having those 1, 3, and 5 year goals, at the time, I thought it was the right thing to do, and it would hold our feet to the fire, and we could measure and sort of also, it allowed me to be involved from a top-down basis in what we had committed to, so that everyone felt empowered to make tough decisions that may cost us more money or make the supply chain more complicated. But it was a game changer, honestly. It's allowed us to not only achieve the goals that we're setting out, but actually accelerate some of those accomplishments. And I think it just reinforced at a time when, the recession, then COVID. I mean, there lots of external influences can really water down that commitment, and it's allowed us to hold true to our initial intent. And I think that's one of the things I'm most proud of, is if I fast forwarded from 25 years ago to today and looked around at how we were doing and what we were doing, you know, it's not that different than what my vision and, you know, what I had set out to do. I think we'd like to have bigger impact, and, you know, that's what we're going to try to do the next 25 years, is continue to have bigger influence and impact, and hopefully educate our audiences on ways they can help make the planet a better place. But we really have stayed true to our original goal.
Yeah, and goals are an interesting thing. I feel like Toad&Co is essentially running its own race, right? So you guys are beating your own goals and beating your own goals, whereas I feel like a lot of the rest of the industry is just trying to catch up to where you were 10, 15 years ago. And so for the people listening, I want to talk a little bit about those goals. So they're 100% responsible wool by 2024, 100% recycled synthetics by 2025, save 100,000 liters of water per year by 2025, continue to be 100% organic cotton forever, and no more plastic packaging by 2026. And so there's two things that I'm seeing here. One is that this idea that these are all near sight goals, right? You're not saying this is something I'm going to do 20, 30 years from now and almost passing the buck to figure out. Like, you're saying this is what we're actively doing today, and we'll be checking these off in the next 1, 2, 3 years. And so would love to kind of hear about it. It sounds like the offsites are one way that you do that, but what are some of these ways that you're able to come together and create these goals, and then what you're doing to actually achieve them?
Yeah, I think what's been really fun for me to watch is, you know, we set the goals, and then every season we do a recap from a supply chain standpoint to see what we were able to accomplish towards those 1, 3, and 5 year goals. But what's really been exciting to me is that if you asked every individual in our organization, they would know those goals. And what it translates to is not just the supply chain and the product team working on those goals, but as much the marketing team working on strategic partnerships, and our operations teams, like working with Lime Loop as an example. You know, they're constantly looking for ways that we as an organization across all aspects of our business practices can improve. And in most cases, it's with innovations from others outside the building. And that's been probably the most rewarding. And then it also just, when we hit a goal, and in many cases we've hit our goals earlier, you know, a year, it's a season or two earlier, but we try to set goals that we know if we do our job, we can absolutely accomplish. We wouldn't put them out there if we didn't think we could execute them, but with the idea towards that's the worst case scenario. If we can accelerate it because of an invention that we didn't know about at the time, or a supply chain partner that we get introduced to along the way, then fantastic. Like, we just had a big breakthrough on the polybag side, which has honestly been the bane of my existence. It drives me crazy. As much as we've used recycled plastic polybags and recyclable, it's really just, it's inexcusable. But the reality is, we've done cost analysis of getting a product from the factory floor to the end consumer, and the waste that's caused by not protecting it in plastic is far greater negative impact on the planet than having the bag be the protector. And so it's one of those grin and bear it, or grit your teeth and bear it. But finally, we found in the last, I guess it's probably 12 months. In the last 12 months, we've connected with an organization, Velabags, as part of a partnership. We're working with a plastics-free coalition of companies that are trying to solve this problem. And we're actually in market right now with the beta test. We're hoping to convert more than half of our spring 22 product to this recycled paper solution. And then ultimately we'll be at least on or ahead of our 2020. We'll definitely be ahead of our 2026. We'll be ahead of that plan, particularly as it relates to polybags.
Amazing. And so those listening, if you've ever ordered anything online and it came in a plastic bag inside of that outer packaging, that's what we're referring to as a poly bag. And anyone in any type of retail space is the bane of existence. Even at Lime Loop, I remember that first order we made. Luckily, it was a small order, but each of our individual packages were put inside of a really thick poly bag. And we just assume that the manufacturer, I'm like, they're a bag. They are already a transporting bag. Why would you put another bag around that? Yeah. Luckily, it was the one and only time it happened, but it's just par for the course, right? It's just so great ingrained in the system. So I love that you're taking a look and say, like, this does not have to actually be this way. We can change this.
Yeah. No, it's the amount of waste that's created it just has to stop. And I think there's lots of innovation, and there's lots of money to be made in those environmental solutions. And so I think we're seeing it before our eyes, which is wonderful.
Exactly. Switching gears a little bit, we talked a little bit about metrics and kind of measuring these goals. So we just did a new LCA for LimeLeaf to measure the impact that our packages have in the system. And it sparked a lot of conversations about this idea of measuring and transparency, and how like each different company right now is doing that really differently, which will potentially pose problems in the future. But kind of curious kind of how you guys look at measuring and metrics and being transparent in those kind of things.
Yeah, so we're measuring our carbon footprint, our water usage, waste, and are really trying to, through relationships like the HIG group, which provides a platform that allows us to look at the product level around the impact. And we're working with another partner to potentially translate the impact of the specific product in their checkout cart, and what the impact was relative to a conventional solution and so forth. So we spend a lot of time on those metrics, and they're still getting refined and developed in a way that one thing we're really committed to is never overstating the positive impact or our competitive comparison to someone that is not sustainably designed. But I think really for 2022, now that we're kind of navigated through this last 20 months of disruption, is to fully solve the circular issue for us. We don't really have, we've been working with Renewal Workshop, but I would say that Toad&Co products too many Toad&Co products are going into landfills and not necessarily having end of life solutions. And so we've tried with a bunch of different relationships to reduce that impact, but ultimately we're committed to, in 2022, having a real minimalist approach to what product ends up in the landfill. And so I'm working we've got a couple partners that we're talking to around, some of it is just connecting the relationships we have. We have a lot of, we tend to be the guinea pig, the bleeding edge partner, the beta tester for a lot of these innovations, which we love. And we're kind of at that perfect size where we're significant enough to test scale, but small enough and nimble enough operationally to manage, with a startup partner. And so I'm mapping right now, actually over Thanksgiving holiday, I'm going to be mapping the ecosystem of our existing relationships and some new ones that we're exploring, and then pairing that with an operation we're going to run to encourage our customers when they're done with product, or even if it's just gently used and they want to trade it in for an upgrade, and then have a resell, reuse platform to help our customers, be as sustainable and responsible with their purchasing and their end of life product use as well. So it's a top of mind, big program. And when you spend any time with younger consumers, which we have many of them, they are barely buying new, some of them these days, vintage and resell, and it's great. And then they're also recycling their wardrobes when they're done using their product, which is super exciting to see. I mean, I think the young generation has been inspiring, and I wish I woke up to, as much as I love that we've been doing this for 25 years, it would be fun to have been part of this next generation and all of the energy and inspiration associated with these new businesses and the consumers.
Yeah, on that note, I was curious because we also get a lot of inbound from folks who haven't even started their company yet, but want to learn about sustainable packaging, which of course just goes to show kind of this shift that you're talking about of sustainably first focused folks. And I'm curious, if you were to start your business now, kind of what advice would you give to someone who's starting one of those companies now, and kind of the top things that they should be looking for or doing from the very beginning?
Yeah, I think the thing that I mentioned earlier, I think if I fast forwarded 25 years when I started, I'd be proud of where we are. I think, and that's rare. I've seen a lot of companies that started with us, or has started since, that lost their way at some point. And I think the most important thing is, don't do it because you think it's the thing to do. You need to build a business that you truly believe in. I mean, my values and our leadership team's values, our employees' values are embedded in everyday business decisions. And so I've always, starting back 25 years ago, I started preaching this. Preaching maybe is a little strong word, but inspiring everybody to pass the rocking chair test. And, it was my way of thinking about what we wanted to create as an organization. And so the story goes, when you're 70 or 80, you're at end of life, and you're sitting on your porch in your rocking chair, looking back over your life's work. Hopefully you've had a successful business, and your business is what you set out to accomplish, you've accomplished. You haven't sacrificed your personal life and your family and friends in that process. You've really balanced those two, because I've seen a lot of scorched earth entrepreneurial stories. And then you've left the planet a better place, and you've done an impact to give future generations a better planet. And so that kind of ethos is what our organization lives by, including our culture. The other thing I really believed back then was, how do you minimize the threshold between work and personal life? And so, I'm a big believer in no politics or minimum. You should be your best self at work, just like you're your best self outside of work. And that requires a certain type of person to be able to do that. And it creates a culture where, even through these last 20 months, which has been a really tough 20 months, our team has, been incredibly respectful of everything that's going on around us, but also still has enjoyed, I think, every minute of their time working, at work, whether it's at the office or in most cases at their homes. And, to me, like, to the original question, build the company that reflects your values and your beliefs. And ultimately that will give it the highest likelihood of success and sustainability ultimately. And I think that's fortunately what we've been able to do. I've had the good fortune of the support and some success along the way to be where we are today. And in some respects, I think our team believes we're just getting started. There's really a pretty exciting horizon thanks to the world we live in today.
So true. Yeah, I tell people a similar thing. I'm like, entrepreneurship is too much of a roller coaster for you to get through those lows just because it's a cool thing or just trying to make money. It's not going to pull you out of those lows. I promise you. So
make sure it's something that gets you up.
Yeah, exactly.
You gotta love what you do. Yeah. Actually, I'll share another phrase I stole, or story I stole from an entrepreneur when I was young. Right when I was getting started, a very successful entrepreneur who had just sold his business said to me, entrepreneurship is like going through the woods downhill on a go-kart with no steering wheel. And as the trees come, you lean to one side or the other side. And if you're lucky, you end up in a field of flowers. and better than anyone in the last 4 years.
Oh, yeah.
That is as true as it gets.
I love that. I've heard the one, it's climbing a mountain and you get to the top of the mountain just to see that there's another one right behind it.
Right.
You got to
exactly.
start trekking again.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, as if that wasn't enough, you also decided to bite off another project in the form of Planet Access Company PAC. And so can you tell me a little bit about that and then kind of how that started and where you guys are going?
Yeah, it's really my third love: family, Toad&Co, and Planet Access. And as part of when we arrived at the industry, that first 1996 trade show, one of the things I realized very quickly, because I thought we would be a leader in sustainability on the environmental side. I wanted to have a social mission, but I thought we would also lead on the environmental side. And I realized pretty quickly there was some great work being done and some great leadership in the environmental component. And so I said, okay, well, we're going to be great citizens and we're going to do our part, and we'll lead when it's appropriate and we'll contribute. But no one is doing anything around people and the social side of the equation. And so I thought that's a place we can introduce to outdoor and give them that triple bottom line awareness. And so I started to look for a partner. Actually, we were planning to take our scraps from the manufacturing process, because again, back in the early days, we were domestically produced, and I was looking for a partner to turn those into jackets and blankets for the homeless community, is what I thought. And so I was looking for a homeless community to partner with, and turned out that we didn't have any. We were in Chicago at the time, and we didn't really have a solution. And I got introduced to somebody that was an executive director at Search Developmental Center. They work with people with disabilities and have got a long history of success with providing just meaningful life experiences, homes, group homes, art programs, vocational training, et cetera, for that population. And I asked him, I'm trying to figure out a 1 + 1 = 3. And he said, well, we would love to be your partner. And so I didn't have a connection with that population. I was just looking for a sophisticated non-for-profit that could help us. And so we did camping pillows the first year, realized pretty quickly, it was a pilot, really realized pretty quickly, sold a ton. Our retailers loved the story, were super supportive, but we realized the actual process was not scalable, and it just wasn't going to touch enough of those people's lives on the vocational side. And so in the first year, our partner, John Lipscomb, came to me and said, this probably isn't working, but I've got an idea, because they were also tagging, bagging, and shipping the camping pillows for us. And he said that those functions and that opportunity is meaningful. Meanwhile, we were shutting down our office every Friday afternoon and picking all of the orders for the next week. And so he said, why don't we take over your warehouse? We'll use technology, and we'll have coaches, and we'll use it as a vocational program. And that turned into their own warehouse, which turned into a program that within, I think, 3 or 4 years, we launched Search for Adventure, which that program funded travel adventures, everything for those adults with disabilities, which in many cases had never been on a vacation, even as old as 40 or 50 years old. And so Appalachian Trail, Dude Ranch in Colorado, Graceland, they get to pick where they go. And our employees, even some of our customers, have gone on trips as volunteers. It's really a life-changing experience. And Search for Adventure and Planet Access have been going for over 20 years, which is fantastic. And now we're expanding into, they opened a retail store in Chicago called Planet Access Store, and it talks about the partnership. And they have a Visibilities Arts program that we are going to start. We've done art openings. We act like a gallery for the artists, and they come to the gallery openings and so forth. But we're going to expand that program and maybe even provide the ability to buy products and artwork on our website. And then disability awareness training. They have this great play that they put on with the Disability Awareness Players, which is a group of individuals that put on about a 45-minute training and certification program, allowing businesses, retailers, restaurants to understand how to be appropriately engaged with people in that population. And for somebody who had spent it was probably 15 years when I first went through the training, I thought I knew everything. And it's both heartwarming and incredibly educational and informative. And so we're going to try to roll that out now that everybody's on virtual, because the problem was it was hard to scale. We couldn't have them travel to do events, but now we're looking at that curriculum and trying to figure out how to expand the impact and the footprint of that program. So it's a great, exciting project. And we are winding down the warehouse. Pre-COVID, we started talking about it as we were getting bigger and as just some challenges associated with their ability to scale that program, and all these other great programs that potentially have bigger impact. We decided in an Amazon world, it might make sense to get out of the fulfillment business and instead spend that energy and resources towards some of these other programs that'll have equal, if not more, impact.
That's amazing. And what I'm hearing too, I feel like when it comes to impact, especially for someone like you who has so many stakes in the ground already through Toad&Co, you could literally just work against those for the rest of your life and have a full plate. But there's an opportunity to really open up that aperture and see, like, what am I missing? What other areas can I touch? What do I have blind spots to? And I think through Planet Access and a lot of the other work you're doing, you're opening up that aperture. And I think it's such a remarkable thing to do, given kind of everything that's on your plate already.
Yeah, I think one of the things that keeps me as young as I think I am is working with younger entrepreneurs and inventors and innovators in both the for-profit and non-for-profit space. So I do some informal advisory work with some really cool organizations, and through that you get educated and introduced to new ideas. It really keeps your your eyes open to the possibilities. And that's what's so special about today's ecosystem is that everybody's thinking about different aspects of it. I was just, one of the areas that we're focused on is sustainable travel and ecotourism, and really preserving the 30 by 30 initiative for climate, and preserving these beautiful spaces that are both carbon reducing and also pristine places that people should be able to visit for the rest of their lives and maintain. And so figuring out how our business can be in partnership with some of those local communities and even indigenous peoples that are responsible for stewardship of those places, and then educating tourism to be much more responsible, much more sustainable, and not love to death the places we cherish most. And so there's so many different fronts by which, a sustainable business model can have impact. And, as we get bigger, we'll be able to do more and more. And I'll have new and interesting projects to keep me busy while my team continues to crush it.
Yeah, exactly. And not only is sustainability kind of not a contradiction to profit, but they're not mutually exclusive, right? You don't have to just portion it out and just be the nonprofit. You can fold that into a for-profit. You don't just have to be a social impact. You can fold that into being a really successful financial business. And I know that's the ethos of the triple bottom line, but I don't think it's talked about enough as one. People love to put things in boxes, right? And so
Right.
I love that you're basically saying, no, like these are ands.
Yeah. And I mean, it all comes back to that consumer, and an aware and intentional consumer that is putting their buying power behind the right products and the right services that are going to be better for the planet. Makes it good business, and I think that's the really exciting part, is that being sustainable environmentally and socially is now more than ever financially sustainable as well. And so that's how you have the biggest impact. That's how you scale. And that's how I think we're going to get out of the challenges that we face environmentally today.
Exactly. Again, so as if that wasn't enough, you are also the chairman of the Outdoor Industry Association. So I want to give you an opportunity to talk about the work you're doing through that and how that ties into what we've been talking about and everything that's happening at Toad&Co as well.
Yeah, no, well, so I'm retired from the chair role. I was chair until thankfully, I mean, not thankfully, but before COVID, I had already stepped down in my 3-year term. But the outdoor industry is a great organization. I was on the board for probably 15 years. I was brought in as the voice of youth, and they didn't let me leave without becoming the chair for a few years, and hopefully teaching some of the younger voices of youth as I had aged a thing or two about what makes the industry so special. But it's a great organization. They do a ton of work in DC and in the local governments around advocating for preserving our recreational lands, providing access to all communities. I mean, they do wonderful work. And the outdoor industry, one thing I would say, having had the aspiration of what the outdoor industry was from an outsider perspective and as a user prior to getting into the business, it's lived up to every aspect of my of that aspiration, and that the industry is just a great place to work, and the people there are smart and interested in making the world a better place. And it's not about money, although there's lots of success in the industry, but it's really, people are there because they want to be there. And so it's been a great experience being part of the outdoor industry. I've gotten roped into the Adventure Travel Conservation Fund, so I'm on that board, which is super fun, and that's where that international conservation and travel component of opportunity is presented. And then I sit on this really neat graduate program at UCSB, the Bren School, where they are effectively, it's a graduate sustainability or environmental solutions school, and they have an entrepreneurial track now. And so kids come in and do a 2-year project to solve an environmental problem in the form of launching a business to solve that. And that's been incredibly fun, because it's everything from aquaculture to climate change to other environmental solutions. And so I've also tapped into some of, kind of what's in the pipeline in terms of future solution opportunities. So it's been fun, but the OIA is a great organization, has done a lot to keep the community together. And, we haven't been together in a while. Hopefully COVID will be behind us in 2022 and we can reconvene as a community.
Yeah, and that's going to be an amazing first meeting, because I feel like people in general's relationship with outdoor has just changed drastically over this past year. I mean, I was living in California through most of COVID, and the trails were just packed with, like, there were certain days where you just couldn't even go because they were just, I'm like, where did you all come from? But I think thankfully one of the positives that came out of this was this idea of, like, okay, if I can't go hang out indoors with other people, what are my options outside? And I think this literally a whole new world opened up to people. So I can only imagine what's coming down the pike for that.
I couldn't agree more. I think the awareness of and connection with nature has never been stronger through this period. And I think people have had the time to think and reflect on what makes them happy and what they were doing before that really maybe didn't make a lot of sense. And, and also analyzing their footprint and understanding, having the time to be thoughtful about some of their purchasing decisions. I mean, I think it's been a sea change. We'll see, as how much of the old habits we go back to, but I am very optimistic that there's a much broader engagement. I think that's the other thing, is that all walks of life that might not have been outside have gotten outside, gotten connected to nature. And, it's going to be a really, and that's one of the things I've always believed, is that the outdoor space and connection with nature is part of living a full life. And if, you have that connection, that rocking chair test is going to be that much more enjoyable if you've been fortunate enough to connect with nature along the way.
Amazing. So wrapping up, we have what I now realize is kind of our rocking chair question that we usually like to end with, but now I'm going to have to rebrand it. So I'm going to rebrand it as the holiday party cheers. And so it's 10 years from now. It's 2031. You're at the Toad&Co holiday party. You're reflecting on the past 10 years of how things have been at Toad&Co. What are the goals you achieve? Who are you as a company? What are some things that you'd love to be able to highlight at the 2031 holiday party?
I'd love to be carbon neutral or carbon positive as a company. I don't know if that's achievable at this point, but that would be a really proud moment if we could accomplish that in the next 10 years. I think that I look at post-COVID as really a new chapter in the business because of what it took to get through, particularly 2020, and to see the team rise to the occasion the way they did. And to just, I haven't been more proud of our organization, and I've always loved our organization, but I haven't been more proud of our organization than in the last 20 months. And it's just so fun. I mean, our leadership meetings every morning, we spend 15 minutes personally laughing. And, even though we have a lot of stress and a lot of business and so forth. And so I think, I hope that in 10 years, this opportunity that we've been given, this next phase of impact, I think we are going to have a much larger scale impact than maybe we ever believed, certainly before COVID. And so I hope that I can toast to the teams taking advantage of this opportunity we've been given to navigate through and come out the other side stronger and more committed than ever to being a part of the solution. And I think, within that carbon neutral, I mentioned the circular commitment, but I want to have a fully circular business model developed at that point. And I think it'll be sooner for sure. 2022 is going to be a big priority for that. But I think, at the end of the day, we're hopefully just a bigger, more influential, more impactful version of the business we've been all along the way. And with the hope that there's another 25 years on the horizon. Probably not with me, but hopefully I've done my job succession-wise to make sure that the DNA is deep and wide within the organization.
Yeah, it sounds like you're well on your way to that. And I can definitely cheers to that 10-year cheers. So thank you so much, Gordon. It's been an amazing conversation. And if you haven't already been multitasking and checking out toad&co.com, please make sure to head over there and do that. And we'll definitely pick up the conversation again, Gordon.
Thanks, Chantal. Real pleasure to be with you today.
Likewise.